They had conquered over 100 worlds. Their ships blackened the skies of every system they touched. The Rallic Dominion didn't ask for surrender. They landed, they overwhelmed, and they erased resistance with cold precision. To them, war was not an art, it was protocol. Their generals, wrapped in centuries of genetic superiority and pride, saw themselves as instruments of inevitability. When they reached Earth, they expected the same swift compliance, or chaotic collapse they had found elsewhere. But Earth didn't collapse. It bent. It bled. Then it vanished. Entire battalions landed and encountered no centralized command. No glorious last stands. No dramatic negotiations. What they saw instead were abandoned cities, booby-trapped infrastructure, and long-range attacks from nowhere. Their patrols reported being watched, but thermal scans showed nothing. Combat drones were disabled by strange electromagnetic interference. Communication towers collapsed hours after occupation. Logistics lines, the very arteries of their military, were severed without warning. But the generals laughed. They dismissed it as cowardice. In their briefings, they compared humans to cornered animals, skittish, disorganized, too fragmented to pose a real threat. They marveled at how humans clung to projectile weapons and camouflage rather than plasma artillery or Neuralink targeting systems. One general said, "They use single-shot rifles. They are scared to even show themselves." Another chuckled. "They fight like ghosts. Not warriors. Hunters with no honor." That phrase stuck, ghosts. The Dominion launched more troops, more walkers, more air power. Cities were turned to ash in retaliation, but the problem worsened. Their own officers started dying. Not during battles, but in calm moments. One was taken out while stepping out of a transport, another while eating in a makeshift command tent. Always one shot. Always through the head or heart. Always clean. Silent. An internal memo circulated among the mid-level command. "The humans are employing long-range precision weapons. Snipers. Isolated threats. Low scale. High accuracy." But when this reached the high command, it was dismissed. "This is panic," they replied. "One shot cannot threaten a war machine." But then General Vaethor was killed, an old veteran who had crushed rebellions on 7 different worlds. Shot through the optic node while inside a mobile command base, armored, shielded, protected. The bullet, simple metal, chemically propelled, had pierced 3 layers of security and a centimeter of bone. The shooter was never found. The Dominion command blamed it on rogue human survivors using salvaged alien tech. They called it a fluke. They refused to believe humans were capable of such precision. Their next move was arrogance incarnate. To demonstrate control, they forced their remaining generals to land on Earth in person and broadcast their operations live. The idea was to show dominion, crush morale, and end the sniper myth. Cameras captured towering alien generals giving speeches in conquered capitals. Crowds were forced to watch. Drone coverage aired the spectacle across alien-held territory. And then the generals began to drop. Not all at once. Not with explosions. But mid-sentence, mid-motion, clean holes through their skulls. Gasps turned into screams. Security forces scrambled. Panic spread faster than orders. And still, no shooter. No origin. Just one shot, one kill. Something began to change. Alien soldiers started refusing to go above ground without shielding. Some units dug into bunkers and refused to move. Frontline morale cracked. Even their elite trembled at shadows, glass windows, rooftops. The word sniper gained an almost mythical status among the troops. They began inventing rituals before stepping outside, holding breath, touching their armor, whispering old chants. The Dominion generals met again in orbit, now in private. There was no laughter. No jokes. The transcript of that meeting was never leaked, but rumor says one of them asked, "Why do they kill only once? Why not empty their rifles? Why not make noise?" The answer was silence. Not metaphorical, literal. No one spoke. No one had an answer. Because no other species had ever fought like this. The Rallic were used to brute force and technological superiority. They had never faced patience. They had never faced the discipline of a human who could wait for days without moving, just to fire one perfect shot. They did not understand the psychology of fear delivered not by firestorms but by stillness and silence. And still, they denied the reality. They increased orbital scans. They burned forests. They launched atmospheric filters and heat maps. They blamed it on terrain anomalies, technical malfunctions, even sabotage by rival generals. But the truth was now undeniable. Someone, or something, on Earth was fighting back. Not loudly. Not with grand armies. But with precision. With discipline. With cold, methodical focus. And for the first time in their long, victorious history, the Rallic Dominion whispered not of conquest, but of death delivered by a breath of wind. The ghosts of Earth had awakened. The first confirmed kill was dismissed as coincidence. A logistics officer, mid-transit, found dead with a small puncture in the cranial cavity. No plasma scorch, no blast. A simple entry wound, clean exit. The autopsy revealed the projectile was metallic, primitive in origin, but the damage was absolute. The Dominion tagged it as a remnant resistance attack, random and insignificant. But then the second body dropped. Then the third. None during combat. All in controlled zones. Each time, the same method. One shot. Always fatal. They tried to calculate the odds. Statisticians were brought in. Probability models were run. The patterns didn't fit any previous insurgency. The targets weren't random grunts. These were specialists, communication officers, unit commanders, energy technicians. And none of them were killed during direct conflict. It was as though someone was choosing. They responded with force. Patrols were doubled. Aerial scans intensified. Thermal drones flooded the sky. Yet the kills continued. A colonel on a morning inspection route terminated. An engineer performing routine maintenance, dead before hitting the ground. Each attack had the same rhythm. One moment of normalcy. Then silence. Then a body drops. Anxiety crept into every layer of command. The usual aggressive discipline began to waver. Junior officers hesitated to give orders in the open. Meetings were moved underground. High-ranking personnel wore kinetic armor even indoors. But the shots never came from where they expected. A general was struck while reviewing maps in a sealed dome, the projectile tearing through a minuscule ventilation slit from over a mile away. They began to understand, this wasn't luck. This wasn't scattered resistance. This was trained, deliberate, and surgical. Whoever was behind it didn't just shoot, they hunted. Waited. Watched. Chose the precise moment when fear would ripple loudest. The Dominion command scrambled for an explanation. They suspected ancient alien tech. Some theorized cloaking devices or quantum displacement tools. But the remains of each projectile were mundane, copper-jacketed lead, manually loaded. Old tech crude by galactic standards. But in the hands of the right users, it was devastating. Earth didn't need superior weapons. They had mastered the psychology of control. Alien units began deploying sound traps, devices that tracked auditory disturbances across kilometers. They failed. Sniper shots didn't come from where they were heard. Because they weren't heard. Earth's shooters used subsonic rounds, insulated barrels, suppressed ignition. The trigger pull was quieter than a breath. Drones sent to triangulate the source failed. Signals were jammed. Readings skewed. One drone captured a blur, a hint of cloth and shadow, and then ceased transmission. It was never found. Debriefings became emotional. Soldiers began speaking of ghosts again. Not as metaphor. As truth. We never saw them, one survivor whispered. But they were always watching. Commanders shifted strategy. They cleared miles of terrain, raised forests, leveled buildings. Still, the bodies dropped. The snipers adapted, moved, waited. One alien squad discovered a nest, abandoned but elegant. A shallow depression, perfectly camouflaged, with the hand-dug firing hole aimed through 2 trees. The sniper had been lying there for days. No fire. No food. Waiting. The fear wasn't just from death. It was from the unknown. Every alien officer now wondered, am I already in someone's sights? No tech could protect them from a shot they couldn't predict. They weren't facing a rebellion. They were facing discipline forged in silence. Humanity's response wasn't loud. There were no speeches, no propaganda. Only results. Kill after kill, each an incision across the Dominion's arrogance. They weren't fighting an army. They were being dissected by an unseen hand. And each loss damaged more than flesh, it tore morale. An alien battalion commander was found dead in a secured compound. No windows, no visible entry point. Investigation revealed the shot had come from a collapsed sewer duct 400 meters away, fired through 2 concrete barriers. Calculated. Not impulsive. He had been watched, studied, timed, and executed. There was no pattern to follow, because the humans didn't follow doctrine. They followed instinct, terrain, timing. They had no rigid structure to anticipate. They adapted faster than the Dominion could react. After 2 weeks, casualty reports reached uncomfortable thresholds. Not in volume, but in effect. The number of command-level losses exceeded every other war zone combined. Not due to firepower, but precision. Entire squads began refusing to patrol. Units suffered internal collapse, not from enemy attacks, but fear of the next silent shot. One alien intelligence officer, reviewing the patterns, muttered the first honest words uttered in the war room. They are not trying to win with fire. They are dismantling us with silence. And Earth had only just begun. The Dominion's command structure responded with a flurry of countermeasures. Satellite arrays were realigned. Atmospheric filters were activated to detect chemical propellants. Surveillance drones with thermal optics flooded operational zones. Anti-sniper squads were deployed across key territories. They assumed the threat came from static human marksmen hiding in predictable nests. But each tactic failed before implementation. Because Earth's defenders weren't following the enemy's expectations. They were reshaping the battlefield. Human sniper teams operated in small, decentralized pairs, sniper and spotter, trained not only in marksmanship but in environmental manipulation, behavioral prediction, and psychological warfare. They moved with no pattern, used false nests to bait retaliation, and vanished before detection. Their success wasn't in firepower, but in information control. They chose every shot not for scale but for consequence. The Dominion's frustration turned into obsession. One general declared snipers a Class 1 tactical threat, elevating them to the same level as orbital strikes. A new doctrine was drafted, dedicating entire units to hunting human shooters. Sweep patterns were conducted across scorched forests, ruins, and ravaged hills. But snipers used their movements against them. They allowed alien patrols to pass untouched, planting false tracks, leaving behind misleading trails, even mimicking signs of failed human activity. Time and again, these alien units returned with nothing but confusion and casualties. The Dominion underestimated how Earth terrain worked against them. Their heat signatures stood out. Their armor reflected sunlight. Their movements broke natural patterns. In contrast, human teams blended with wind direction, animal noise, even insects. They didn't just hide, they disappeared into the world itself. One failed operation became legendary among alien ranks. An elite detachment tracked a sniper signal to a remote valley. They surrounded the position, confident in their numbers. They approached slowly, weapons raised. They found a decoy rifle fixed on a tripod with a broken scope. The real sniper had taken their commanding officer minutes before their arrival, from a ridge nearly a kilometer away, and vanished. Each failure deepened psychological erosion. Units began second-guessing their own data. Some officers refused to operate during daylight. Others demanded armored shadows or satellite coverage just to step outside. It wasn't fear of combat. It was fear of being watched. Of never knowing when or where death would come. Humans escalated the campaign. Targets shifted from tactical officers to critical logistics. One shot destroyed a Dominion power distribution node, halting energy to an entire regional command. Another killed a flight operations supervisor during launch prep, grounding assault crafts. Each kill was a calculated interruption. Not chaos, but targeted disruption. Not destruction, but surgical dismantling of the enemy's operational stability. Dominion strategists attempted predictive modeling. They sought patterns in timing, terrain, even lunar cycles. But the results returned blank. Because human teams didn't follow a sequence, they adapted to the alien behavior itself. Each response created a new opportunity. Each adjustment exposed new weaknesses. And the snipers struck only when those moments emerged. A captured Dominion communications log revealed internal panic. Messages between commanders were coded with increasingly desperate language. Phrases like silent death corridors, unseen warfare, and precision ghosting became common. Entire planetary campaigns stalled, not due to force, but from command decapitation. One particular sniper unit, operating without external contact, remained undetected for 17 days. In that time, they eliminated 5 officers, redirected 3 enemy patrols using false trails, and lured a high-value convoy into an ambush zone, without firing more than 6 rounds. Their method was control, not conflict. Meanwhile, Dominion troops began internalizing failure. Lower-ranking soldiers refused night shifts. Mid-tier commanders asked for reassignment off-world. Some fabricated reports just to avoid exposure. In one case, an alien officer destroyed a hillside after hearing wind rustle grass, convinced a sniper had taken aim. There was no threat. Just paranoia. Which, by then, was the point. Humanity didn't rely on overwhelming resistance. They fractured enemy cohesion by making command untenable. The Dominion's strength, its rigid hierarchy, became its greatest liability. With every sniper shot, the head was cut, and the body lost direction. Orders slowed. Units hesitated. Strategies stalled. Because no one wanted to be next. The aliens still held orbit. They still possessed superior technology. But none of it mattered if they couldn't step outside without risking execution. No orbital cannon could prevent a man in camouflage from waiting 3 days for one moment. No force field could stop a bullet that had already been fired. It was no longer about winning the war with battles. It was about breaking an empire by removing its will to fight. And that war, Earth had already mastered. The operation was never given a name. No headlines, no broadcasts, no declarations. Just coordinates, timing, and trust in human silence. 12 sniper teams, each assigned a target so vital that eliminating them would unravel the Dominion's occupation. These were not field officers or strategists. These were the last 12 generals directing the planetary command, huddled together in a heavily fortified compound buried beneath Antarctic ice. Every line of alien defense technology had been concentrated around that frozen tomb. Shields, surveillance, psychic dampeners, automated sentry algorithms, all designed to eliminate anything that moved, breathed, or emitted heat. But they had failed to account for patience. Human intelligence had identified the location weeks earlier. The Dominion believed isolation would guarantee safety. Instead, it offered precision. Satellite scans showed ingress points. Weather patterns provided cover. A window opened, 31 minutes where the orbital sensors would be focused on an inbound meteor storm. That was the moment. Each sniper pair positioned themselves days in advance. Movement was minimal. No comms, no signatures, no margin for detection. Their orders were simple: wait. The snipers had trained for this scenario all their lives, not just to shoot, but to understand pressure, rhythm, and stillness. No backup would come. No extra rounds. No retreat. One shot. One purpose. As the hour approached, Dominion Command remained oblivious. Inside the compound, the generals gathered in a secure hall, reviewing data from collapsing operations across Earth. Their decisions were panicked, disjointed. Some argued for immediate orbital bombardment. Others demanded total withdrawal. But the moment to decide never came. At exactly 0400 hours, Earth time, 12 bullets were fired in 12 different locations. Each traveled over a kilometer. Each pierced barriers designed to withstand energy blasts. Each struck with unerring accuracy. 12 pulses of death, each tailored to its target's exact vitals, direction of movement, and moment of breath. Not one missed. Within 90 seconds, the compound descended into chaos. Secondary officers screamed into comms, but no orders followed. Surveillance feeds went dark. Detectors picked up nothing. There was no trace of attackers. No movement. No threat. Just corpses and silence. Panic spread through Dominion ranks. With no chain of command, planetary units froze. Entire regions fell into disarray. Troop formations disbanded. Communications fragmented. Some commanders attempted to seize control, only to be executed within hours. Whether by sniper or mutiny was never confirmed. What mattered was the effect: collapse. The orbital fleet, still holding above Earth, received fragmented data. The command signals they depended on vanished. Request protocols failed. Emergency authorizations returned null. The Upper Admiralty, already on edge, assumed the worst, that Earth had launched a full-scale offensive. They ordered strategic withdrawal. Not because of damage, but because of the unknown. No commander was willing to risk becoming the 13th. As ships pulled away, human forces moved without sound or celebration. No resistance was mounted. No pursuit. The point had already been made. Earth had dismantled the Dominion not with firepower, but with surgical precision. They had waited until the enemy clustered, believed themselves safe, and then removed their leadership in a single breath. The psychological impact was irreversible. Reports spread fast. Across Dominion-controlled systems, the legend of the 12 Ghosts circulated like wildfire. No one knew their names. No one ever saw their faces. They became myth. A dozen phantoms who could breach the unbreachable, strike the untouchable, and vanish before a response could be formed. For Dominion strategists, the implications were catastrophic. Their doctrine had been built on dominance, overwhelm, crush, display power. But power had failed. They hadn't been defeated in battle. They had been unmade by a force that never announced itself, never asked for victory, never paused for applause. The realization rippled through every level of their civilization. Earth didn't just defend itself, it rewrote the very rules of war. The snipers never returned to fame. Their identities were sealed. Their weapons dismantled. Their lives returned to shadows. But the void they left behind reshaped an empire. Recruitment across the Dominion plummeted. Entire divisions defected, fearing leadership meant being marked. Some planetary governors declared neutrality. Others vanished. Fear spread not from war, but from the belief that a human might be watching, right now, just beyond the range of sound. What had started as planetary resistance had become a demonstration. Not of violence, but of consequence. And the Dominion, once the galaxy's most feared war machine, was left leaderless, humiliated, and unraveling. Not because Earth had superior weapons, but because Earth had learned how to end a war with just 12 quiet decisions. Across the stars, the impact of Earth's silence echoed louder than any weapon. The fall of 12 Dominion generals in a single hour shattered the illusion of invincibility. Their systems had relied on central command, on visible strength, on the assumption that fear came from overwhelming force. But Earth had demonstrated that true power was the ability to strike without being seen, to dismantle without grand declarations. The lesson embedded itself into the Dominion's core like a splinter they couldn't remove. News of the collapse didn't spread through official channels. It didn't need to. Whispers moved faster than couriers. Outposts that once flew Dominion flags began taking them down, not in defiance, but in fear. Soldiers stationed on occupied worlds requested transfer. Some sabotaged their own command structures, unwilling to wait for the unseen judgment they believed would come. The psychological fracture deepened with every passing day. Academic centers within the Dominion tried to reframe the event. Historians labeled it the tactical silence, attempting to strip it of myth and reduce it to anomaly. Military strategists insisted it was an unsustainable method, not replicable beyond Earth. But the soldiers didn't care about analysis. They believed in what they saw, or what they never saw. They believed that Earth, primitive and chaotic as it had seemed, had birthed a breed of warrior that made death intimate and unpredictable. Dominion training academies were forced to introduce sniper theory courses. Not to create their own, but to understand how they had been undone. Case studies reviewed human patience, psychological manipulation, environmental dominance. Yet none of their simulations replicated the results. Their culture was too rigid, too reliant on control and immediate action. They couldn't replicate humans not because they lacked tools, but because they lacked mindset. A fringe rebellion on the mining world of Karza cited Earth's actions as inspiration. Their leader, armed only with stolen footage of the operation aftermath, said, "We don't need armies. We need decisions. Calculated, untraceable, and final." That rebellion succeeded in 3 days. Not from strength, but from the fear they could be Earth's next example. That fear spread faster than any uprising before it. In the galactic core, among the high councils of neutral species, the event caused a shift. Where once Earth had been mocked as inexperienced, unstable, emotionally erratic, it was now studied with caution. Diplomatic offers arrived cloaked as alliances, but motivated by self-preservation. Civilizations began mapping human behaviors not out of curiosity, but out of necessity. Their question was no longer, "What can Earth offer?" but, "What happens if Earth watches us next?" Earth responded with silence. No broadcasts. No demands. No fleets. Just a firm grip on its own territory and a refusal to entertain further encroachment. That restraint unsettled many more than retaliation ever could. Most powers expected a declaration of dominance, a claim to vengeance, or at least a list of terms. But none came. Humanity wasn't interested in theater. They had already made their point. A single satellite broadcast reached the former Dominion capital. No speech. No sound. Just one looping frame, crosshairs resting silently on the exterior wall of the Dominion Council chamber. No shot was fired. No threat delivered. Just a visual truth, * you are visible. And we are patient, *. The image was replayed in military academies across dozens of species. An unspoken understanding emerged: if humans acted again, it wouldn't be out of impulse. It would be precise, inevitable, and without warning. Empires built on intimidation began reevaluating their foundations. The illusion of control had been pierced by something colder than war: accountability. Generations later, children in Dominion remnants grew up hearing stories not of the battles they fought, but of the day the generals disappeared. They didn't remember names. They remembered the silence that followed. Some believed it was just a myth, exaggerated by shame and fear. Others believed the snipers were still alive, still watching, waiting for a reason to rise again. In war memorials on Earth, no statues stood for those 12. No medals, no parades. Just a phrase etched into stone, surrounded by emptiness. They saw what others missed. They waited when others rushed. They ended what others prolonged. There were no signatures. No names. Because for Earth, the goal had never been recognition. It had been deterrence. Not by threatening total destruction, but by reminding the galaxy that in a universe ruled by noise, they had mastered the art of silence. The Dominion didn't just lose a war. They lost the luxury of ignorance. And that loss would echo longer than any empire could endure.